So, the reinforcement sensitivity theory. I just want to touch on this. This was a theory put together originally, Gray and McNaughton, and they suggest that individual differences in personality and behaviour are explained by the sensitivity of the individual to reward and punishment, and their associated tendency to either approach a situation or avoid a situation. So this theory has got real kind of implications for how we understand differences in an individual's comfort with change and what motivates people to pursue goals. So what the theory actually says is it refers to the degree to which people are likely to either approach the situation because they see it as approaching reward, because they have an approach orientation to change, and that's usually linked with personality traits around optimism and impulsiveness. Or it's about the degree to which they're likely to avoid situations of uncertainty and role conflict, especially where self-worth is possibly threatened. And it also refers to the degree to which an individual responds to high levels of immediate threat by means of fighting back, as in fight, and the degree of the response of an individual to less immediate threat by flight or freezing. Now, in general terms, humans tend to respond to high levels of immediate threat by fighting back, and will tend to respond to less immediate threat by fleeing or freezing. And what the reinforcement sensitivity theory suggests is that individuals with high optimism and reward orientation are more likely to actively embrace change, while those who easily react to unpleasant, unwanted situations will more easily recognise the threat of not changing and want to flee towards a safer option. A gentleman called Martin Turnbull, a researcher, 2015, in his paper, A Model of Motivation for Facilitating Sustainable Change, identified 4 change personality types. So what we've actually done, we've taken Turnbull's 4 types and overlaid them with the Jigsaw framework. Now, it's not a perfect fit, but it does actually help, and they kind of complement one another, shall I say. So category A, as Turnbull calls it, are people who naturally demonstrate an approach personality trait. However, what we find is in category A, although the person has got an approach natural kind of trait, they're not on board necessarily with the change. And when they're in that position, then they basically make a noise. They let it be known. They vocalise their opposition to change. And they'll even go as far as openly criticising and undermining a change strategy. If they don't see any reward in changing, or if the change is insufficient from their perspective, then they will fight to maintain the way things are. They'll fight for the status quo. So people falling into this category need convincing through messages framed with positive approach language to activate that approach action towards accepting the change. Statements that affirm people's significance can be really helpful here. Whilst we often think about people with a high red behavioural preference as being the drivers of change, what I particularly like about this model is, on Turnbull's model, is that we can hear it gives us an opportunity to consider if the red preference isn't on board with the change, if they're not in the driving seat of the change, if it's not aligned to their own priorities and goals, etc., then the red is likely to display these category A behaviours. So how can we what can we say to these people? Here's an example from Turnbull. He suggests using statements similar to the ones that's on screen. So we can see there red language in there, the use of words such as competitive, outcomes aligned to the red behavioural preference. We can also see how Turnbull creates a reward in significance or status domain by talking about being a key player, a valuable employee, their support being essential. So moving on to category B people. People who demonstrate avoidance personality traits may, when change is taking place, experience fear when they're initially faced with the change. That can lead to anxiety and internal conflict because of the uncertainty that it is all resulting in. And that will hold them back from getting on board with the change. So here, in this instance, Turnbull suggests tapping into their innate pessimistic outlook by creating motivating messages using avoidance framed language, which supports this group to see that actually not changing is clearly a greater threat than the change itself. Also, it's quite useful to think about using statements that will address and acknowledge the uncertainty and anxiety. So again, there's a couple of different statements I'll show you here. I'll give you the one on screen at the moment. And the second statement I'm going to show you addresses or helps to address that anxiety and the uncertainty. Okay. So category C people. These are people who demonstrate approach traits and embrace change. They'll actively go out and seek change and how they can get involved in supporting it. So they're unlikely to pose any real significant challenge during the change process. So this is a group we can tap into as potential change champions, really, who might be able to influence other people, perhaps the people that are sitting on the fence and not fully committed to the change. So here again, Turnbull suggests something fairly straightforward, as we can see on screen. Again, talking about in yellow language the opportunities, and that we'd welcome their input, their support, their ideas in how we can bring others along on this change initiative, very much playing into the ray of sunshine, the yellow language. So lastly, our category D, people who demonstrate avoidance traits, but actually recognise that there is a need for change. Now, they will tend to be easily motivated by aversive stimuli and more quickly see the threat of maintaining the status quo. They'll still feel uneasy about the change, even though they understand the need for change. And we need to provide reassurance to this group throughout the process, letting them know that it's still worth investing the effort in. Remember, the brain and the effort, unless the reward is great enough, it won't actually go along with the change. So here again, Turnbull suggests that the reassurance of suggesting those regular check-ins. We can also see examples of green preference language, acknowledging their concerns, encouraging them to raise concerns in the future, expression of appreciation. So the important insight really of this theory is that there is a strong relationship between motivating actions and innate traits everyone demonstrates when experiencing change. So the next time you want to bang your head against the wall, having to deal with someone who is resisting change, remember the reaction is just a natural way they react to change. They're not just being difficult, honestly, to make your life hard.